Work-driven project management doesn't mean that we ignore some of the fundamentals, like critical path. How does critical path help in project management? We're going to be addressing this primarily from a predictive cycle approach because that is the fundamental of how other project management approaches have been born and developed. But it doesn't mean that the basic understanding of the elements that contribute to critical path in a predictive environment aren't just as important if you're working in a more iterative environment. As the project leader, as the project manager, understanding the so important relationship between the work and the schedule can't actually be overemphasized. After all, as professional project managers, ultimately what we are hired to do is deliver. And that means on time as possible, within budget as possible. And sometimes it means also reminding some of our key stakeholders that if we didn't make the original due date, it could very well be because of, I don't know, changes they've requested. Yeah, change management, that's a whole different topic. That's a topic for another video. So critical path, again, the relationship between work and time. The first thing that you need to know about critical path is that it does not mean that the work on the critical path is necessarily the most important work on the project. As a matter of fact, it might surprise you some of the pieces of work that end up being very embedded into the critical path because of their relationship to time, because of the lack of flexibility in terms of when it must start and when it must finish, because it's that relationship to time that becomes an issue. So that's the first thing to kind of understand. What critical path isn't. What critical path is, and why it's particularly useful when we talk about predictive approaches, is that it's a way of determining the best shot of how long the project actually is going to have in its life cycle. Some people call it the project duration. I call it the project life cycle. When you understand the nature of the relationship between the work and the time it's going to take to do the work, and therefore when certain pieces of work have to happen, then you have a much better idea of what your rough estimate is. And I'm saying rough because we do this at the beginning of the project. We are probably going to be addressing it on an ongoing basis, but our very first attempt at figuring this out is still a rough estimate of when we can most reasonably be finished. Because critical path gives us our first really reasonably sound estimate of how long it's going to take for this project to complete. Now, many of you are going to tell me, yeah, Kimi, you keep using that word reasonable. I don't think my boss knows how to spell it. Never mind, find it in the dictionary or his or her vocabulary. They do. But you see, you're not the only one who operates under the pressure of the tyranny of the urgent. So, back off a little bit for them. Be more understanding. Be a little bit more generous. When you do a critical path analysis, what you're doing is you're using the estimates that you've gotten from the people who are going to do the work. And that needs to be double checked against, yes, I know, here it comes again, that word, reasonable expectations based on the workload they already have. Come on. Nobody's just sitting around going, doity, 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 doity. I wonder if Zimsky's got a project she wants me to work on. Everybody's busy. And as we know, our projects just add one level of complication to them. So the first thing that critical path analysis does is it gives you a reasonable estimate of what this project is more likely than not going to take in terms of weeks and months and sometimes years. It's also a good reason why you might want to not do this for the whole project, because critical path can help in a project by only being done in phases sometimes at a detailed level. At a very high level, you address those other phases. They're going to come after this one. And the second thing is to understand. Reasonable means these are based on existing schedules and existing workloads. That's when you really become involved, because that's when the gap between what somebody wants and we can most likely deliver needs to be assessed, and you have to figure out how to close that gap. That's about when you're going to want to get your senior leadership team involved. You see, the information that Critical Path gives you about the impact of every single piece of work and its relationship to time, that's how Critical Path helps in project management. Whether you call it Critical Path or not, understanding the relationship between each piece of work and the amount of time it's going to most reasonably take also means you have a clear shot at being able to figure out what you might need to do to meet unreasonable expectations. In the Enlightened Triple Constraint, we talk a lot about how important it is to have a foundational, strong relationship of trust with each of your key stakeholders, because without that trust, you might not get a full understanding of what those expectations are. Without that trust, you also cannot have the conversation about why somebody thinks an expectation is perfectly reasonable. And you might not know exactly how to break it to them that for these reasons, boom, 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 it's not actually as reasonable as they might think. Without that ability to have those conversations, it doesn't matter how much Critical Path or those elements of Critical Path, the work and the relationship between time and the work, it doesn't matter how much it could help. It's a communications tool. More than anything, it's a communications tool. And if you don't have the right relationship with your stakeholders, it's going to be really rough to effectively communicate the impact of those relationships. So think about what you know, why you know it, and how you know it when it comes to the expectations of your key stakeholders. And that includes your team members. Don't forget your team members. If you don't have the strongest of relationships with them, it's going to be really hard for them to deliver hard news to you. Make it safe for them to tell you, Zimsky, you know those 10 hours that I promised you over the next 2 weeks? Yeah. My boss apparently had different ideas. I need help with this. Awesome. I can't help you solve a problem that I don't know anything about. So I need to make it safe for them to come to me with problems, or I can't help them solve it. I can't help them get those obstacles out of the way so that they can do the most powerful job they can on my project to deliver our customers. Internal or external, doesn't matter. In the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy, we focus on practical steps So I hope I've explained to you why this is so important, but also a couple of straightforward things that you can do to make sure that now that you understand how critical path can help project management, you also understand some steps you can take so that you can communicate its value and its potential impact a little bit more effectively. Those suggestions, actionable immediately, are the key to every single one of our video lessons. So if you find them useful, please like, subscribe, comment, please. That would be awesome. And if you know somebody that you think would find this topic interesting, please share it with them. Maybe even encourage them to subscribe. Because when you subscribe, you're going to get notifications of each and every time that we release a new video on a new topic. So we'd love to have you join us. I'm Kimihiro Tsuzimski. Thank you for joining us.